The call came on a Wednesday morning, and the woman on the other end of the line sounded like she hadn't slept in 3 weeks. She hadn't. Neither had the secret she was carrying. My name is Franklin Wilson. I'm 65 years old. I live in a craftsman bungalow on Maple Ridge Lane in Boise, Idaho. The kind of house that takes 20 years to get right and another 20 to fully appreciate. I retired 2 years ago after a career in civil engineering with the Idaho Transportation Department, and the plan was simple. Slow mornings, long walks along the Boise Greenbelt, and watching my daughter Maya build the life she deserved. Maya is 31. She teaches 3rd grade at Longfellow Elementary School on Targhee Street, about 4 miles from my house. She has her mother's laugh, big, unguarded, the kind that fills a room, and my stubbornness, which she would agree with if she were here. Her mother, Carol, passed from a stroke in 2019. It has been just the two of us since then, Maya and me, navigating the world a little more carefully than before. So when Maya called me on a Sunday evening in late August 2024 and told me that Derek Chambers had proposed to her at dinner the night before, I did what any father who has been through loss does. I cried. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I sat in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and my daughter's happiness pouring through it, and I cried like a man who'd been waiting for something good for a long time. Derek Chambers, 29 years old, a financial advisor at a firm called Summit Wealth Partners on West Idaho Street in downtown Boise. He wore pressed shirts. He opened car doors. He called me sir every single time without being prompted, which, if I'm honest, was the detail that had won me over earliest. Maya had been with him for 2 years. I had met him 11 times, I counted, because I am an engineer and engineers count things. Every time, he had been warm, attentive, and present in the way that genuinely good people are present. I thought I knew him. The engagement party was Maya's idea, but the execution was mine. I insisted on paying for the whole thing. Maya pushed back the way she always does. Dad, it's too much. You don't have to. And I told her what I always tell her. Your mother would have wanted this done properly. That ended the argument, as it always does, because it is always true. I hired Gwen Larson of Larson Events, a local planning firm based in the Brickyard on Americana Boulevard, to coordinate everything. Gwen had been recommended by 3 different people in my neighborhood, and the moment I met her in her office, I understood why. She was methodical, warm, and had the particular quality of someone who takes other people's celebrations personally. She had coordinated over 200 events in the Boise area since 2011. She knew every venue, every caterer, every florist. I trusted her immediately. The party was set for Saturday, September 14th, 2024, at the Boise Center on Front Street, a private event space with views of the downtown skyline and the foothills beyond. We had 80 guests, family, friends from Maya's teaching colleagues, a handful of Derek's co-workers from Summit Wealth Partners, and Derek's parents, Gary and Lorraine Chambers, who had flown in from Portland, Oregon. Gwen's team handled everything, catering from a local restaurant called Cottonwood Grill, a string quartet for the first hour, a DJ for the dancing, and, at Gwen's suggestion, a professional videographer named Patrick who moved through the room with a small gimbal camera, capturing the evening in the unobtrusive way that good documentary-style videographers do. Invisible. Everywhere. Recording everything. I didn't know, on the night of that party, that Patrick's camera would become the most important piece of evidence I'd ever hold in my hands. The evening was everything I had hoped it would be. Maya wore a deep green dress and her mother's pearl earrings. She glowed. Derek gave a toast that was funny and genuine and made 3 women cry simultaneously, which I considered a reasonable benchmark for success. Gary and Lorraine Chambers were gracious and easy company. Gary had been a high school football coach for 30 years and had the handshake to prove it. I gave my own toast near the end of the evening. I talked about Maya's mother. I talked about the kind of man I hoped Derek would be for my daughter. Steady, honest, present. I looked at Derek when I said the word honest, and he held my gaze and nodded. The room applauded. Maya wiped her eyes. I sat back down, feeling, for the first time in 5 years, that the world was putting something back that it had taken. The party ended around 11. I helped Gwen's team carry a few of the centerpiece arrangements to my car. Shook Patrick, the videographer's hand. thanked Gwen for an extraordinary evening, and drove home through downtown Boise with the windows down and the September air coming off the foothills. I went to sleep that night feeling the specific peace of a man who has done something right. The following 3 weeks were ordinary. Maya was happy. Derek was attentive. They were looking at apartments together in the North End neighborhood. Life moved forward the way life does when everything appears to be fine. Then the phone rang. Wednesday morning, October 9th, 2024. 7:53 a.m. I was on the Greenbelt, about half a mile from the Americana Bridge, with my coffee going cold in my hand. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Old habit from 30 years of fielding calls on infrastructure projects. Mr. Wilson. The voice was Gwen Larson's. I recognized it immediately, but something in her tone stopped me mid-stride. It wasn't the warm, organized voice from the event. This was quieter. Careful. The voice of someone who has been rehearsing a phone call for days. Gwen, good morning. Is everything all right? A pause that lasted just a beat too long. Mr. Wilson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you somewhere private right now? I looked around at the empty stretch of Greenbelt path. A cyclist had just passed. Headphones in. Nobody else within earshot. I'm alone on the Greenbelt. What's going on? I need to show you something. Something Patrick captured on the night of your daughter's party. Another pause. I need you to come to my office. And Mr. Wilson, please don't bring Maya. Don't tell her about this call. Not yet. The September air that had felt so good 3 weeks earlier suddenly felt very far away. Gwen. I kept my voice level. Tell me what we're talking about. I'd rather show you in person. I want you to see it for yourself, with your own eyes, before we decide what to do. Can you come today? I looked at my coffee. I looked at the river running alongside the path. I thought about Maya in her mother's pearl earrings, glowing in that green dress. Give me 45 minutes, I told Gwen. Gwen's office in the Brickyard is a converted warehouse suite, exposed brick, high ceilings, a long conference table made from reclaimed wood. When I walked in at 8:45 that morning, she was already waiting. No assistant. No coffee offered. She stood up when she saw me, and the expression on her face confirmed what her voice had already told me. Whatever this was, it was serious. Thank you for coming so quickly. She gestured to the chair across from her laptop. Sit down, please. I sat. Patrick delivers his edited packages within 2 weeks of each event. Gwen began, her hands folded on the table in the composed way of someone keeping themselves together through structure. He sent me the full raw footage along with the edited highlight reel, as he always does. I review the raw footage before I close out each event file. It's just something I do. I check for anything that might need to be flagged before it goes to the client. And you flagged something. I flagged something. She turned the laptop toward me. I'm going to play you a segment from the raw footage. It was captured at approximately 9:47 p.m., about 40 minutes before the party ended. Patrick was in the corridor outside the main event room. He was transitioning between spaces. She met my eyes. He didn't know he was still recording. She pressed play. The footage was slightly jostled. Handheld, corridor lighting, the low thrum of music from the event room behind the closed door. Then 2 figures came into frame. Derek Chambers in his Navy suit, and a woman I didn't immediately recognize. Dark hair, red dress, standing close, closer than the corridor's width required. Then Derek's hand, on her waist, and not the polite, incidental kind. Then the woman turned slightly and I recognized her. Kelsey Marsh, 27 years old, junior associate at Summit Wealth Partners, Derek's co-worker. She had been at the party as Derek's colleague, introduced to me briefly near the bar, pleasant and professional. She had smiled at me. She had a glass of white wine. She had been sleeping with my daughter's fiancé, and from the footage, it had been going on long enough that they touched each other in corridors, the way people touch each other when they're no longer careful about being seen. On the screen, Derek leaned close to Kelsey's ear and said something. Kelsey laughed, a soft, private laugh. Then she reached up and straightened his pocket square. It was 15 seconds of footage. 15 seconds that told me everything a father needs to know and a daughter deserves not to find out from a stranger. I watched it twice. I didn't speak. Gwen closed the laptop. The office was very quiet. How long has Patrick been doing footage for you? My voice came out steadier than I felt. 8 years. Has he seen this? No. I caught it during my review. He delivers full raw files and moves to the next job. He won't have reviewed this section. I nodded slowly. And you haven't told anyone else. Only you. You're her father. This was your event. You deserve to know first. She paused. I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson. I genuinely am. I've coordinated a lot of celebrations. This is the hardest call I've ever had to make. I looked at the closed laptop for a long moment. Then I stood up, thanked her, and walked out into the brickyard courtyard. The Boise foothills were golden in the October morning light. The air smelled like dry grass and autumn. I didn't know it yet, but what I did in the next 48 hours would determine whether my daughter walked into a marriage built on sand or whether she had enough of the truth to make her own choice. And I had raised Maya Wilson to always have the truth. There's a particular kind of rage that doesn't yell, it doesn't throw things. It sits very quietly in your chest and makes a list. I drove home from the brickyard on autopilot, down Americana Boulevard, right on Franklin Road, left onto Maple Ridge Lane, and I sat in my driveway for 11 minutes before I went inside. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the clock on the dashboard the whole time. Engineering brain. When everything else is chaos, you count what you can count. Inside the house, I made a fresh pot of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my notebook. I still keep a paper notebook, old habit from decades of field assessments. And I wrote down 3 things in the order I needed to think about them. What do I know for certain? What do I not yet know? What does Maya need from me right now? What I knew for certain, Derek Chambers had been physically intimate with Kelsey Marsh at his own engagement party, the party I had paid for, in a corridor outside the room where my daughter was glowing in her mother's pearls. The footage was unambiguous. I had watched it twice with clear eyes. What I didn't yet know, how long this had been going on, whether it was ongoing or a single catastrophic lapse, whether anyone else in Derek's world knew, whether Kelsey Marsh knew Derek was engaged, or whether she was also being deceived. And what Maya needed, the truth, all of it, delivered by someone who loved her, not from a rumor, not from a screenshot someone texted her, not from an anonymous source, from her father, but not until I knew more. I want to be clear about what I did next, because people often assume that a 65-year-old retired engineer from Boise will react to something like this by either doing nothing or doing something loud and permanent. I did neither. What I did was methodical. I called my attorney, a man named Howard Beck, who has had an office on West Bannock Street for 30 years and is the kind of lawyer who answers his phone on the second ring regardless of the hour. I explained the situation plainly. Howard listened without interruption. Then he told me what I needed to hear, that the footage belonged to the event coordinator under the terms of her standard contract, that she had every legal right to share it with the client, which was me, and that I was under no legal obligation to do anything with it, but that I should document everything carefully before I acted. I asked Howard if he could reach out quietly to Summit Wealth Partners through a professional contact to find out whether Derek Chambers had any formal complaints or disciplinary history. Howard knew people. He always knew people. He said he'd make a call. I didn't know it yet, but that call would pull on a thread that had been loose for much longer than 3 weeks. Thursday, October 10th, the day after Gwen's call. I had slept maybe 4 hours. I was up at 5:30 at the kitchen table with my notebook again, when my phone buzzed with a text from Howard. Call me when you're up. Found something? I called him at 6. Howard's voice was measured, but there was something in it. The particular weight of a man delivering information he wishes he didn't have. Franklin, I spoke with a contact at the Idaho Department of Finance, the division that handles licensing oversight for investment advisors. Derek Chambers has an active complaint filed against him from a client, filed 8 months ago. The complaint is still under investigation. I set my coffee mug down. What kind of complaint? Unsuitable investment recommendations. A retired couple in Eagle, Gary and Patricia Norwood, filed a complaint alleging that Chambers moved their retirement portfolio into high-risk instruments without their full informed consent. They lost close to $60,000. The investigation is ongoing. It has not resulted in any formal action yet, but it's there, Franklin. It's in the record. I wrote Gary and Patricia Norwood, Eagle, Idaho, in my notebook. Then I wrote the number $60,000 under it. Then I underlined it twice. Is this public record? I asked. Regulatory complaints filed with the Idaho Department of Finance are public record once they've been received and logged. Howard confirmed. I can get you the documentation. Get it. I hung up. I looked at my notebook. I looked at the morning light beginning to come through the kitchen window over the backyard, where Carol had planted a row of lilac bushes 20 years ago. What kind of man had been sitting at my table calling me sir and shaking my hand for 2 years? I need to talk about Derek Chambers, not just as my daughter's fiancé, but as a person, because I think it's important to understand how predatory behavior operates in plain sight. What I was learning about Derek was not random or accidental. It was a pattern. A man who can sit across from a retired couple, earn their trust, recommend financial instruments that benefit his commission structure at the cost of their retirement savings, and then smile through a regulatory complaint. That man has a particular relationship with deception. He has practiced it. He is comfortable inside it. The corridor footage wasn't a moment of weakness. It was consistent with who he actually was. People like Derek do not compartmentalize by accident. They train themselves to present one face while operating another. It is, in its own terrible way, a skill. And the reason it works is that the rest of us, decent people, people who take other people at face value, are not looking for it. We're not built for suspicion. We extend the benefit of the doubt because that's what good people do. That's what I had done. For 2 years. Friday, October 11th. I called Gwen and asked her to send me a copy of the footage segment, formally in writing, through her standard documentation process. She did. I had it on a USB drive by noon. That afternoon, I drove to Eagle, a 20-minute drive west of Boise, and knocked on the door of Gary and Patricia Norwood. I want to be honest. I wasn't sure they'd talk to me. They didn't know me. But when a 65-year-old man with gray in his beard knocks on your door and tells you he's the father of the young woman who is engaged to the man who took your retirement savings, and that he found out 3 days ago and he is trying to protect his daughter before she walks down an aisle. People talk. Gary Norwood was 71, a retired pharmacist. He opened the door, looked at me for a long moment, and stepped aside. Patricia brought coffee. We sat at their kitchen table in a house that was immaculate and modest and carried the particular dignity of people who had worked hard for everything in it. Gary told me the whole story. Derek had been assigned to their account 18 months ago after their previous advisor retired. In the first 6 months, he was attentive, called regularly, sent birthday cards. Then, gradually, he began recommending portfolio shifts, away from the conservative bond-heavy structure they'd specifically requested, into equity funds and alternative investment vehicles that carried significantly higher risk. He explained every change. He used the right language. He made it sound like opportunity. They trusted him. They lost $58,000 when the market moved against the positions he'd put them in. When they questioned him, he blamed market volatility. When they filed the complaint, he stopped returning their calls. Patricia Norwood cried telling me this, quietly, with her coffee cup held in both hands. I thanked them. I gave Gary my phone number. I told them I would be in contact. And I drove back toward Boise with the USB drive in my jacket pocket and a clarity that only comes when anger finishes burning and leaves something cold and useful behind. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, thank you. Saturday, October 12th, 1 month to the day after my daughter's engagement party. I called Maya in the morning and asked her to come to dinner at the house that evening. Just the two of us. I told her I had something I needed to talk to her about and that it was important. She heard something in my voice. Maya always hears what's underneath. And she was quiet for a moment before she said she'd be there at 6. I spent the afternoon at the kitchen table, organizing everything. The USB drive, Howard's documentation from the Idaho Department of Finance, my notes from the Norwood's kitchen. I put them in a manila folder in the order I planned to present them. Then I cooked dinner, chicken marsala, Maya's favorite since she was 12, and the one dish I could make properly because Carol had taught me and had made me practice until I got it right. I thought about Carol a great deal that afternoon, about what she would have done, about what she would have said. She would have done exactly what I was doing. She would have made the chicken marsala. She would have told Maya the truth with love. She would not have softened it to the point of uselessness, and she would not have delivered it as a verdict. She would have laid it out and trusted her daughter to handle it, because Maya was always strong enough. Maya arrived at 6:15 with a bottle of wine and a smile that disappeared within 30 seconds of looking at my face. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Sit down, sweetheart. Dinner's almost ready. We'll eat first." She narrowed her eyes. "You only cook chicken marsala when something has happened." She had me there. There is no good way to tell your daughter something like this. There is only the honest way and the cowardly way. I have never been a coward. I wasn't going to start at 65. We ate dinner. I let Maya talk about her week, a field trip her class had taken to the Boise Zoo, a new reading program she was implementing, the apartment she and Derek had looked at in the North End that had original hardwood floors and a clawfoot tub. She was happy. She was making plans. She was building a life in her mind, room by room, and I sat across from her and listened, and let her have those last few minutes of unbroken certainty. Then I cleared the plates. I poured her wine. I sat back down. I put the manila folder on the table between us. Maya looked at the folder. She looked at me. "Dad, I love you." I held her gaze. "That's the first thing. Everything I'm about to show you comes from that, and it ends there too. Okay?" She nodded once. Her jaw was tight. She already knew, the way children of people they love always know, that the folder on the table was about to change something. I started with the footage. I explained Gwen's call. I told her about Patrick the videographer, about the raw footage review, about the corridor outside the event room at 9:47 p.m. on September 14th, 2024. I described what I had seen before I showed her. I wanted her to have the words before the images. Then I turned my laptop toward her and played the segment. She watched it once. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. Then she reached out and played it again. The second time, she paused it at the moment Kelsey Marsh straightened Derek's pocket square. She stared at the frozen frame for a long time, long enough that I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "Maya." She pulled her hand back. Gently, not angrily. She needed her hands to herself right now. I understood that. "How long have you known?" Her voice was flat and careful, the way voices get when emotion is being held back by sheer will. 4 days. I wanted to be sure I had everything before I came to you." She looked up. "There's more. There's more." I walked her through Howard's findings, the Idaho Department of Finance complaint, the Norwood family in Eagle, the $58,000. The timeline, 18 months of mismanagement. The complaint filed 8 months ago. Derek continuing in his role under investigation, continuing to call me sir, and open car doors and give toasts at engagement parties, while a retired couple's savings were tied up in a regulatory filing he was pretending didn't exist. Maya listened to all of it without interrupting. That's her engineering brain. She got it from me. When information is coming, you receive it completely before you respond. You don't process and react at the same time. When I finished, she was quiet for almost 2 full minutes. I counted. Then, "Did he know you knew about the complaint?" "No. He has no idea I know any of this." "And Kelsey? Does she know I'm aware?" "No." Another pause. "Does Gwen still have the raw footage?" "Yes. And I have a copy on the USB drive in that folder." Maya opened the folder. She looked at the Idaho Department of Finance documentation, page by page, with the focused expression of a woman processing information through the same systematic framework her father had used for 30 years on infrastructure assessments. She did not cry. Not yet. That would come later, privately, and it would be hers. What she did instead was something I had not expected, something that told me, in case I had ever doubted it, that her mother's strength had passed cleanly into her. "I need you to help me handle this correctly," Maya said. "Not just for me, for the Norwoods too." The following week moved with the kind of purpose that clarity brings. On Monday, October 14th, Maya called Derek and told him she needed to speak with him. She met him at a coffee shop on 8th Street downtown. Guru Donuts, neutral ground, public enough that the conversation would stay controlled. She went without me, at her request. She went with the USB drive in her purse, and the knowledge of what was on it. She told me afterward what happened, and I'll tell you what she told me. She sat across from Derek and said, "I need you to tell me about Kelsey Marsh." Just that. No context. No accusation yet. Just the name. The color left his face in under 2 seconds. She said it was the most honest thing she'd ever seen him do. He tried to explain. He used the words, "It didn't mean anything," which, as Maya noted later with a dry precision that was entirely her mother's, was somehow supposed to be reassuring. She let him talk. She let him construct his defense. Then she set the USB drive on the table between them. "There's footage," she told him. "From the party. In the corridor. I've seen it. My father has seen it. Our attorney has seen it." He stopped talking. She then told him about the Norwoods, about the Idaho Department of Finance complaint, about Howard Beck, about the documentation in the Manila folder. Derek sat there in Guru Donuts on 8th Street in Boise, Idaho on a Monday morning in October, with the full weight of his own choices laid out in front of him by a 31-year-old third-grade teacher in a cardigan, and he had nothing left. No charm, no pocket square to straighten, just a man looking at the version of himself that he'd hoped no one would ever fully see. Maya put her ring on the table. She stood up. She said, "I'll need you to collect your things from my apartment by Thursday." She walked out. I could not have been prouder of my daughter in that moment if I had tried for 100 years. Howard Beck filed a formal letter on behalf of the Norwood family the following week, October 21st, 2024, to the Idaho Department of Finance Regulatory Division, providing additional supporting documentation for their existing complaint and requesting expedited review. Gary Norwood told me later that their case officer called them within 5 days of Howard's filing to inform them that the investigation had been escalated. I won't share the outcome of the regulatory process because it's ongoing and I'm not a lawyer. What I will tell you is that the Norwoods were contacted by Summit Wealth Partners Compliance Department in November 2024 regarding a potential settlement discussion. Gary and Patricia Norwood, who should have been spending their retirement years without a care in the world, were finally being heard. Derek Chambers was placed on administrative leave at Summit Wealth Partners in late October 2024. I learned about the leave through a contact Howard had at the firm. I did not reach out to Derek. I had nothing to say to him that Maya hadn't already said more precisely than I ever could have. Kelsey Marsh, for what it's worth, did not know Derek was engaged when the relationship began. She reached out to Maya in November through a mutual contact, asking to apologize. Maya chose not to meet with her. That was Maya's choice to make, and I supported it without question. I want to stop here and talk about something that has nothing to do with revenge, because this channel isn't really about revenge. It's about what happens when decent people refuse to be taken advantage of. The lesson I carry out of this is not about Derek Chambers. Men like Derek have always existed and will always exist. People who perform trustworthiness while practicing its opposite, who calculate the gap between what they appear to be and what they actually are, and live in that gap like it's sustainable. It isn't. It never is. Eventually, a Gwen Larson reviews her raw footage. Eventually, a Patrick with a gimbal camera is still recording in the corridor. Eventually, the gap closes. The lesson is about what you do when you find out. You don't act from rage. You act from love. You build the case carefully. You bring in the right people. You let the people who deserve the truth receive it with dignity. And then you sit across the table from your daughter and you make chicken marsala and you tell her everything. Because she is strong enough. Because you raised her to be. And because the only thing worse than finding out is finding out too late. Today is January 2025. Maya is doing well. She is still at Longfellow Elementary, still teaching her third graders, still driving home past the foothills on winter evenings when the sky over Boise turns that particular shade of amber that makes the whole city look like it was painted. She went to Chicago for the holidays with her college roommate, Sarah, She came back with color in her cheeks and 3 new books and a clarity in her eyes that I hadn't seen since before the engagement party. She still comes to dinner every week. I still make chicken marsala more often than is probably reasonable. We talk about Carol. We talk about the lilac bushes in the backyard. They'll bloom again in April, same as every year, same as they always have, regardless of whatever the world does between now and then. I am 65 years old. I have been through loss. I have rebuilt things. I know what it takes to lay a proper foundation because I spent 30 years building them. Bridges, roads, structures meant to hold weight. I also know what happens when someone builds on a foundation they've deliberately compromised. It holds for a while. It always holds for a while. And then Gwen Larson reviews the footage. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely.